of the things that I wanted to talk about today, I'm hoping most of this stuff will be really new to you. I'm trying to include some really practical takeaways and some little tips and things that you may not be aware of to streamline the process and make this as easy as possible. It's really important to kind of recognize that what we're trying to do here is a little bit different than social media marketing generally. When we think of social media marketing, often the first thing people think of is that business to consumer model. Now, this is obviously very different. We're not selling Coke or Pepsi here. And it's also a little bit different than business to business, the B2B marketing. What we have here is what they call B2G, or in this case, G2B. So this is business to government. In fact, we're talking about government to business. You are talking about marketing your locations. And because we've got government voices, the representations, if you're a chamber of commerce or a utility, there's a kind of authority and credibility that's really important to include here. As we look through these social media strategies, I'm really kind of bearing in mind the voice of B2G or G2B, or even if it's B2B, if it's a utility who's interested in marketing economic development. Now, when it comes to talking about this kind of government to business or business to business marketing, it's really important that we maintain this authoritative, credible voice. You, by nature of who you are, you have that account going for you. We also want to make sure that we're putting those faces on places, because sometimes what happens with a large business, a utility, or a government organization is it can seem very impersonal. So the opportunity of social media marketing is to personalize as much as possible. And I really believe that putting the focus on people, the people in your community, the people who run your businesses, the people within your organization, is a really critical way to establish some voice and personalize something that might otherwise seem like a big impersonal entity. We also see that with B2B or G2B marketing, we want to be looking to inform, to educate, and engage. And the engagement piece is really critical, because often social media is viewed as this kind of one-to-many communication, sort of like our legacy media, things like radio or television. And that's a mistake. We aren't one voice speaking to people and they are mute and passive. We want to engage them as much as possible as well. And that's a real opportunity when it comes to social media. So we'll think about that with the messaging. Now, the other thing about B2B or G2B marketing is that we are looking for that kind of descriptive text, data as much as possible. So we're informing people, educating them. We're using images. When it comes to economic development, I know that maps are really, really important. And we're going to talk about how those maps can be used strategically. We'll look at the importance of image and video and other kinds of interactive tools, and the way in which you can use those things both as a source of content, but also a way to make your website stickier once you're able to get people there from those social media tools and the messaging that you're putting out there. The other thing about social media that's really interesting and important is that it reduces the burdens of accessing information in a timely and efficient way. So what I mean by that is that people often view big business or government organizations as somewhat obtuse and impenetrable. It's really sometimes complicated to find the information that you might want. And the opportunity of social media is to take away those barriers, to make that information really accessible, to put it out there, to be consistently and constantly giving people links to it, to make it, in language that is engaging, but also really informative, not the kind of policy bureaucratic speak that sometimes people associate with government organizations. Now, the other thing about social media for economic development is I recognize many of you may be working in offices that do not have dedicated communications and marketing teams. I know economic developers often wear more than one hat in the course of their day. And if you are in charge of running the social media marketing for your organization, as well as doing other things, you may worry that social media can be a tremendous time suck, and it does not have to be. It is really important that we think about how to set it up so that once it's up and running, you could be able to manage it in somewhere between 5 and 15 minutes a day. You can set up things to tweet automatically, to post automatically. You can use things like, Hootsuite, for example, or the HubSpot social deck to program and schedule things. So once they're set up and running, you can turn them off and focus on other stuff and just check back occasionally to see if there's any engagement that you need to respond to. Then you could go on and get on with the rest of your work. Now, it's also important to recognize that although I'm going to be talking about Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn here, there is actually a huge variety of options when it comes to social media. I'm trying to focus in a little bit here because this is supposed to be that 5-item takeaway to make sure this is simple as possible for you. But there are many different kinds of social media accounts out there. And at the same time, there are many, many different ways to use them. So I've just got a smattering of some things up here, infographics and videos and images and properties of the week and all sorts of ways in which we can make this interesting. Let's take a look then at our the first of our 5 strategies. First of all, again, as I said, I really want to make sure that social media is an advantage for you and not a time suck. And I know that that really can be a big concern in any business, certainly. So if you don't have a dedicated communications team, rather, then it's no problem. Let's think about how we can make this work. So the first thing is to really focus in on what social media you want to be using. So LinkedIn organizational page, I really like those. I'll talk about that again in a second. They're free to set up and they're amazing for information and engagement. The LinkedIn moderated group, you can set up your own group. Let's say you belong to a state or a county or even you head up an economic development organization or chamber of commerce in a town. You can set up a group for the business owners and stakeholders and brokers within that area, anyone who wants to join, and you can moderate the group, but you also can encourage that conversation. This is a wonderful way to both put out your information, but also generate that kind of engagement and create that sense of ownership among the stakeholders in your communities. Get them talking to each other as well as listening to what you have to say and you listening to what they have to say. Twitter's really fun because it gives you a source of actionable intelligence. So I love Twitter not just because I can put this information out there for people to look at what I have to say, but also because I can see what they're saying. And you can generate lists of your, let's say competitor organizations within your region or colleagues within your region that you want to work with. You can see what kinds of things they're saying. So click at a list and see what that looks like. You can use hashtags in order to search key terms. We'll talk a little bit more about hashtags in a moment. And it's a great place for engagement. I have not heard that many actual leads coming from Twitter. If you have an exception, please let me know. I'm always happy to hear those stories. But that seems to be somewhat less common on Twitter than it would be, for example, on LinkedIn. Now, Facebook is a great place to engage business owners. We know that a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs are on Facebook. They've got pages for their own communities because that's where they can access the community at large, their customers, for example. And so it's a nice place to be able to do that. Again, in the B2B and government to business sphere, I'm not hearing about a ton of leads coming from Facebook, but that doesn't mean that it's not a good place to do that. So this is just kind of a bit of an overview of some of the information. Of course, YouTube, we know YouTube is very, very powerful when it comes to SEO. If you have a YouTube channel for your economic development organization, it's a phenomenal way to make sure that you've got some powerful stuff turning up at the lists. If someone's looking for your Googling you, then your YouTube channel will come up near the top. And one of the most important things to remember about YouTube is that video itself is not indexed by Google. It cannot index the content of your video. What it can index is text. So anytime you post a video on a YouTube channel, make sure that you have some really strong keyword heavy text description below the video to go along with it, because that's what Google is going to be looking for. And it's a great place to put out that information. I've seen a number of economic development organizations using YouTube in very powerful ways to profile local businesses, to talk about local industry clusters, basically to color in the lines and fill in information about their communities. Now, there are many others. You will, of course, know about Instagram, Snapchat, Pinterest. Those are, of course, there's many, many more than that. Those are great for SEO and for establishing a presence. But ultimately, I am a very strong believer that when it comes to economic development, you want to fish where the fish are. And we know that if you have to just narrow down because of time or resource constraints and pick just one or two places, I'm a big believer that LinkedIn is where the fish are. We know our business owners are on there. We know it's not pictures of people posting their vacations and what they've had for lunch. This is a place where people more or less tend to stick to some pretty serious stuff. So that's one of the places that I would encourage you to really focus most of your energies and time if those things are at a premium. If you had to just pick one, that's where I would start. Now, I know as businesses and government organizations are concerned about comment moderation, and sometimes are worried that if you are setting yourself up on social media, that you open yourself up potentially to loose cannons or trolls, people who might say unpleasant or unsavory things. So one thing you should know is that if you are the administrator for a Facebook page, a company page, you can go over to settings, and then you can head over to general, and then you could put words separated by commas that would make sure those comments are blocked. So if there's certain things that are coming up, many communities don't do this and it isn't a problem. But if you do start to notice that there's, that voice out there that decides they've got stuff to say and you don't really want those things to be aired, then feel free to use that in order to block those kinds of comments. You can also, on a comment itself, choose to click on it and hide it. The person who's posted it does not know that it has been hidden, but it will hide it from the timeline for everyone else. So a little tricky thing that you can do, just go to the comment on the right-hand side. You'll see a little arrow pointing downwards. Click on that, and it will give you the option to hide. Another thing that you may be interested in knowing is that Instagram is really trying to establish itself more and more as a viable social media alternative for economic developers. They today have launched a number of additions to their profiles for businesses. So you can, this is an example of American Express, one of the best established brands on Instagram. I'm not seeing a ton of economic developers there yet, but that doesn't mean it won't change. And I'm starting to see one of the things they've done is they've added profiles for businesses today, and there is now going to be a contact button. So you can choose whether they email, call, or text you if they have any questions. Smaller businesses can also include directions to the business using the geolocation software on someone's mobile device. So if you are interested in sharing a lot of images or video, and we'll take a look at how you might want to do that, then American Express is an example here of how Instagram is trying to establish itself more and more as a viable social media option for businesses. I did want to talk about the importance of clarifying your objectives when it comes to your social media messaging for your community, because again, I'm very sensitive to the fact that many economic developers will not have a team of communications and marketing people to handle this for them. So if we want to be as efficient and effective as possible, you need to know what it is that you want to do. Why are you online? And too often economic developers will set up these accounts, let's say on Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn, just placeholder accounts that end up sitting dormant. That's, to me, almost worse than having no account at all. If you are going to have an account, then make sure that you populate it somewhat regularly. I would aim for a minimum of once a week, but ideally we're looking at once a day during the week. Now, you don't need to have every social media tool, but one of the main reasons to have it is that it's going to let us concentrate, on those that are going to give us the biggest bang for our buck. And it's a little bit tricky to see here on the left-hand side, but as an example of a Google search, in this case, I was looking at Greater Reading Economic Development. And at the top, you have their website showing up over here. But you can see that their Facebook page and then their LinkedIn page also show up. So this is phenomenal for SEO because that is showing up on their Google homepage, on that first page of Google search, that all-important first page. So as much as we can structure really high-quality informative links in those search results, we ensure that we're more likely to be found. And then we can structure social media campaigns around the one or two or maybe three that we really feel that we can dedicate our time to. So let's talk about content, because I know that is one of the biggest questions that I often have from economic developers, really from anyone who's interested in doing marketing online of any kind. You want to make sure that you have free sources for lots of good information and visuals. And I know the kinds of content that people tend to like in economic development, things like top 10s, information, data about jobs, about spending, about demographics. Sharing of heat maps is really important because those visuals really tell a story in very powerful ways at a glance that text descriptions don't. And when it comes to social media, visuals and images are key, absolutely, always key. Want to make sure we get those in there. Another really nice thing that I'm seeing economic developers doing a lot is these profiles of successful entrepreneurs or business people within their area. Again, it's about putting those faces on places and making sure that people are able to see who it is that make up the business community. Graphs and charts, posting business of the day, posting properties of the week is another really interesting way to do that. Now, one of the best new sources for information and visuals that I would really encourage people to check out, and I'm going to bring us over to that right here, is the new zoomprospector.com. Now, the interesting thing about this, and let's start over here. Actually, this is the homepage. Is that this is a free site in that it's free for anyone to come in and search information about every community in the United States. There is data for every single community in the US. And that makes it an amazing source of information and data for economic developers, for site selectors, for businesses, but also, really importantly, it's a great place for generating content. And let's take a look at some examples that we've got here. So one of the things that you can do if you go into communities is you can generate all sorts of rankings on hundreds and hundreds of variables in the graph on the left. So in this case, what I've done is I've selected, we looked at consumer expenditures, and I've chosen women's apparel, played around a little bit to see what kind of numbers would work the best here. And it will then let us rank. We could either choose the top 10, the top 20, and you put that information in over there and it will calculate those. And then it will show it on the map over here. Now, what's really kind of cool is, of course, I could click through into any of these communities if I wanted to do that. And I could see them down here on the bottom. But what's really amazing about this is it lets me share it directly from here. This is incredibly powerful. Let's try it out here. So let's say we want to share the top 10 communities based on expenditures for women's apparel. So I'm going to click on Twitter, and it's going to let us, in this case, edit the caption. Let's say we want to go the top 10 cities. Let's say we want to make it the top 10 US cities. Based on purchases of women's clothing. And then we can, put some kind of compelling question. Did your community make the list? And that will let us actually post it directly onto Twitter. In this case, it opens the dialog box. If I wanted to add something here, I could, put hashtag if I wanted to, and it opens up my account in this case because I had it simultaneously open on the screen, and it's going to let me actually tweet that out at that time. And if I go back over to my Twitter profile and you look down here, you're going to see that those things are actually going to come up. Now, what's really interesting is that you can play around with all kinds of information on these, whatever it is, and you can use multi-variable searches. So for example, in this case, I was looking for the top 10 communities based on food and beverage for household, but let's say that only brings up certain kinds of populations. We were getting a snapshot here of the people there. We can go through and visit the community if we actually wanted to get more information about them, because they have these community profile pages that will let us look down there. And again, I said we have this data for every single community in the nation. If you wanted to just from there share something, then you can just open up the dialog box that way. And I could actually share this image preview with a caption and description for that community. That is something that you can really do for every community in the nation. Every community can also go in and put information, contact information. There's ways to do that. And this really allows us to generate tons of information that we can share. And as I was saying, we can do this as a multivariable search. So in this case, I was looking for smaller communities. But if I close that and I just want to see communities sharing, spending that much on food and beverages as a household, it's going to give me, let's see if we can, it's going to change it around a little bit, because now we're not just looking at small and mid-sized communities. We're now going to be able to see all the communities in the nation. I'm just going to refresh that so we can see once we've changed those variables, what that actually turns out to be. Now, I know I do get requests sometimes, what happens if we're looking for communities in Canada. I know that's something that people are interested in finding out. We do not yet offer this information for Canada. Right now, this is just the US. Our intention is, however, to add the information about Canada eventually. So if we have any Canadians on the line, and I know we actually do, then please recognize that we haven't forgotten about you, and we're going to do our best to make sure that we get this information in there. So it will be a North American-wide search eventually. But for the meantime, this is really a tremendous place to generate that kind of information. Again, multivariable searches, hundreds and hundreds of variables, every community in the US. Now, another way that you could generate this interesting information is as heat maps. So in this case, you could go over to any community. I've chosen Chicago here, and you could generate map layers that let us see, we're looking at expenditures on food away from home here, that lets us actually see what we wanted to, let's say, for a particular area, and it will break that down for us. So these heat maps are really phenomenal. You can share this very easily directly from here just by clicking on that. It will open up these dialog boxes. It makes sure there's image, because we talked about how powerful those images and really, really critical when it comes to looking at social media. Again, feel free to change the dialog box if you want to from here, and we could make that work. Now let's see. One way that we can generate this as a community page share is, right now this is going to open it up as a Facebook share. And just because we're working with the API for Facebook, which seems to be taking a moment here, we need to begin by sharing it on our personal Facebook pages, but you can choose only me to say something like that. So I'm just going to show you what that might look like. Let's say I want to share that on my Facebook page. Is that I could click down here and I could choose only me. I can say anything I want. Let's say food expenditures in Chicago, and I will post it to Facebook. When I go to Facebook, because I'm an administrator on the company page, I can then click on share, which only I'm going to be the one to be able to see that, and then share it from there onto our community page if that's something that I'm interested in doing. So great source of free, inexhaustible content for your social media feeds. You can really share this anywhere. It also will generate a link. So we've got the share options up there for LinkedIn, for Facebook and Twitter, but because you can copy the link, you can really share it on any community that you want from there. This is just another example. This will be in the video, so you can click through onto there. Now we're going to take a step back here because I put these a little bit out of order. Now the fifth tip that I really would like to focus on here is strategic use of hashtags, really to choose and use the right hashtags to ensure your posts get seen. Now there's a great service called hashtagify.me. Let's take a look at it over here. And this is a free service. You do sign up for it, but it's just one more password to remember, but you don't have to pay anything. And you can put in any hashtag that you want, and it will do an analysis. So in this case, I used the hashtag site selection, and it does an analysis of the most common hashtags associated with it, and then gives you an indication of the popularity and the correlation related to it. So economic development is there, absolutely. That's a 38 in terms of popularity, whereas econ dev, which seems to be the most commonly used hashtag, is associated with it as well. So manufacturing, an abbreviation for it, very, very popular. Workforce, data center. Let's scroll down here. Unfortunately, because this is the internet, we see other things cropping up on here, but that's not what we're looking for. CRE is really important as well. Let's take a look at just one other one. This is related to econ dev that we set up here. And so we see, obviously, jobs, really tremendously important. Manufacturing always is going to be a big one, and economic innovation, rather, is associated with it. And it will also give you kind of a snapshot of some recent tweets using those things. You can go into advanced mode or table mode if you wanted to get more information about them. But that's a great way for you to go in and really think about what are the hashtags that you're using and how effective are they, and have some fun with it. I mean, this is an example from from the running shoe company Nike, it's important that they're not just using hashtag Nike. You're also getting Project North, hashtag Choose Your Winter. So kind of they're having like it's a little bit more creative. And I think even within a B2B or G2B context, that's absolutely important. And I'm giving you a bonus number 6 here. And that's if you are using Twitter, and I know everyone feels very constrained by that 140 character limit, is that you can reply to your own tweets to create a longer messaging. So here's an example of something we did earlier today. I start off with try 3 cool searches on zoomprospector.com. I put number 1 here, and then I put and this ellipses on the bottom. Then I go and reply to my own message, and I deleted the @Zoom Prospector at the top, and I put number 2 in there, put a link, and an ellipses, and then number 3. And this shows up as a conversation within Twitter. So it's kind of a fun way to have more of a conversation with the tool and to generate slightly longer messages. I think always kind of a fun thing to do. Now, I would love to hear some of your favorite social media tips. So if you are on Twitter and you want to go out and tweet or mention @GIS Planning with your favorite give me a link to something that you're doing or describe it. I will reply to it or retweet it, as the case may be. I would love to hear some of your questions. The question, oh, there we go. Number 3. What was number 3? And that was because I went straight to number 4. So that is that's a good question, but we did get to it eventually. If anyone has any other questions, I would love to see those on the slide. Please feel free to put them in. We do really like, when someone's asking about the favorite a hashtag that we tend to use. We're big users of the EconDev hashtag because I've seen that is really popular, but it's nice to combine it with something else. And I usually find that 2 or 3 is kind of like the limit of the number of hashtags. If you put too many hashtags in, then it kind of is distracting and people find it sort of boring. So we do tend to stay away from that. I have a question actually coming up about the cost of zoomprospector.com. I just want to remind you that this is a freely available tool. There is data on every community in the nation. You are represented, even if you don't realize you are represented. Your organization is up there, so you may as well go on and take advantage of the tool. We know that businesses and site selectors are using it. It is the most heavily trafficked site selection portal, and it is available for the entire United States. So how do we increase LinkedIn organization followers? That's a really good question. So there is kind of like a secret sauce, it seems, with the posting algorithms. And one of the things that we've noticed is that 3 shares or updates a week on your LinkedIn organizational page seems to be the base number for increasing engagement. So if you want more people following you, then you should be posting at least 3 times a week. Now, what are we posting? Again, we talked about, information, maps, some of the stuff from the zoomprospector.com. If you have a GIS site selection tool, such as Zoom Prospector Enterprise or one of our intelligence components, you can use all that information also. We have people putting properties of the week, businesses of the week with links back to their place within the tool. So this is high quality information. Again, an inexhaustible source of content. And that number 3 seems to be the base number of posts a week, particularly on LinkedIn. Now, if you use more than one social media tool, for example, if you're also using Twitter or Facebook, feel free to cross-post the links to each of those tools. So for example, on Twitter, you might say, follow, our organization with your name on LinkedIn and put a link to your page there. And you might get some people coming over from Twitter. But ultimately, think about it. I mean, the organizations you are most likely to follow are the ones that are most engaging, interesting, and informative. And we know that images play a huge part of that. And we know that data or really interesting, compelling information plays a huge part in that. So the more of that content you could be putting out there, the more likely you are to get people, especially the businesses in your area, other local stakeholders, or people who are doing keyword searches to stumble across your community and choose to follow it at the same time. Someone has asked me a question about engagement on Twitter. Is it important to be replying to other accounts from the organizational account? And that is actually a very good point, is that sometimes, again, we think of it as just broadcasting. We just post our information and then we leave. But if you can put together a list of some other compelling organizations, people who are putting out interesting content about economic development or site selection or certain industries that are really important in your area, and put them into a list, create a list. No one, you can make those lists public or private. That's entirely up to you. And then you can choose to reply to or retweet or like the tweets of those kind of organizations. And if you get their attention, they may start amplifying your content as well. And that's really what it's all about, right? That's that engagement piece that is so critical when we talk about social media. This, I think, brings us to the end of our session today. I just want to be respectful of your time. Again, my email address is up there. If you do have a question that was not answered, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm very happy to respond. And again, you'll be getting an email with a link to this recording within the next couple days. And if you are on Twitter or anywhere else online, please feel free to tweet or mention at GIS Planning, and we will make sure that we answer or take a look at your favorite social media tips. I'm always looking for more information. So those who answered questions that I didn't get to, I will respond to you individually. Again, thank you all so much for taking time out of your days, and we look forward to seeing you on another one of our webinars. Have a good day. Bye-bye.